There we go. Okay. All right. Well, once we're now getting started here, does anybody have anything? Anybody have anything specific you want to bring up? Any technical questions? Bill, you're usually good for something there. So, nope. Everything cool in Texas, huh?
Not only
Okay, some of the latest news here that I looked up that I found interesting. Rocket Mortgage is starting to sell solar, and they're basically selling it. It looks like they're like bird dogging it and then working with solar installers, but they're folding the cost of the solar into mortgages as part of the refinance or the initial mortgage investment. So I think that's another interesting way that a lot of these systems are going to be sold, is through the financial end of it, to get them essentially pre-approved. The tariffs on solar set to expire next year, although some of the US manufacturers are now petitioning to the government to continue the solar tariffs. So we'll see.
Which of the U.S. manufacturers?
Axiom.
Okay.
Axiom. They're California based. Yeah, they're not a big one, clearly. I'd be surprised if that were extended. I've been kind of surprised that it wasn't just revoked when Biden took office. But who knows? They're Democrats. They like taxes. So
yeah. Didn't you say that that the prices stayed more or less the same? They just dropped their own pricing?
Yeah, a lot of the Chinese. Now, of course, that's a speculation on my part. They might have fallen 25%, but it didn't really affect the price that dramatically. Largely because a lot of the price buildup was built up in anticipation of the tariffs. And then, the material cost is a fairly small fraction anymore of the total install. So it was apparent, but not dramatic. Maybe 5% increase in cost, something like that. What led me to bring up about solar shingles is there's a new player, Meyer Burger, is a manufacturer that's getting into the solar shingle business. So I was going to touch on that in a little bit. I have my own prejudices against solar shingles, but I was wondering, I'll sort of tip my hand that I'm not all that. I'm like with solar shingles the same way I am with fuel cells. There is always a better alternative. So why pay the premium cost of that?
Do the solar shingles go all the way to the edge of the roof, or do you have to give them 3 feet around too?
Oh, well, I mean, that depends on how you want to define it. Because with an Elon Musk system like Tesla and some of the others, you have to run the shingles the entire way, but they're dummy shingles, because so there's a lot of cost involved in getting the little triangular shingles for the gutters and the edges and all of that. And so the costs are pretty extraordinary. With some of the other ones where they just simply integrate solar shingles in with regular shingles, they have to keep the same 3 foot, and you can see them. You can tell that those are solar shingles versus regular shingles, which I think kind of defeats the purpose. But because it really is just an aesthetic. But I'll get more into solar shingles in a second. The current investment tax credit, which is the 26%. That's in place, is set to expire, of course, in the not too distant future. I think they said 2024. The corporate was going to continue at a 10% rate. There is a bill now filed in Congress to extend the ITC, raising it to 30% again, and then for an additional 5 years, and then reducing it in 2028, but keeping 10%, just like with corporate for residential. And I think I mentioned last week that also there is a movement to get it not just as a credit, but as a cash back. If you're not paying taxes, then you could receive the money back as a cash payment. So that'll mean a lot for nonprofits. It'll also mean a lot for folks on it, Social Security who aren't necessarily paying taxes, that kind of thing. So,
Is that part of the infrastructure bill, Jay, or is that a separate standalone?
it's a separate bill.
Okay.
The expansion of the ITC. Yeah, they had some like solar for the future bill or some silly name. They always
Right.
name these things. You almost can always tell that it's the opposite of whatever they name them. Like tax relief for poor people means that
Yes.
they're going to raise your tax and I don't
Exactly.
know, and build a football stadium or something.
Well, they do have a bunch of stuff in the infrastructure bill for upgrading the grid. I think 73.
Yeah. Let's see. Am I the one jigging out, or was that you, Don? Am I fading out? Okie doke. Can anybody hear me? Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I think Zane State's internet, speaking of infrastructure, just went out, so I switched over to hotspot.
Biden's come to save you.
Yeah, we shouldn't have mentioned that, the infrastructure for the grid or all of that. Yeah, well, there are two infrastructure bills, working their way through the silliness of Congress.
Yes.
There's the one that's in theory bipartisan. I think that's the one that's more traditional, bridges and roads and the like. I suspect the grids. Is it in that one?
It's in that one. It's $1.2 trillion, yes.
I thought the bipartisan was like $500 billion.
I'll have to go back and check. I thought that was the last number I saw, but I saw a schedule of all what they put up a schedule of here's what we're going to pay, here's what we're going to put in place, and here's what we're going to do to make it pay for. But the funny part is like the $73 million one, the infrastructure for the grid, they're paying for that with $13 billion of fees on super funds for chemical companies.
Okay.
So how the 13 is going to pay for the 73, I don't know, but that's the funding.
Well, that's why you're not in Congress, Don. You could figure these things out. I love that they were going to pay for some of this by money that they're not going to spend on COVID relief, which is a lot like my wife explaining to me that we can buy something by not buying something else,
That was a big piece of it too. I saw that one too, yes.
Yeah, look at all the money I saved. It's on sale. I said, no, you still spent money, that's all right. So let's see. So we hope the ITC, personally, I hope the ITC is extended. It's clearly something that's of benefit to the solar industry. It's definitely a tax break for the renewables, which at some point needs to expire. Is that point now? Is it 5 years from now? Whatever. If I were in the fossil fuel industry, I'd say it was about 5 years ago it should have expired. But that's
why don't we get rid of theirs at the same time?
I know that I would love that, but I think it's worthwhile investing in renewable energy, clearly, as an individual and as a government. So I'm all in favor of it. So, a big one here. California State Contractor Licensing Board just voted to restrict the installation of solar to those people holding a C10 license versus a C46. So if you don't live in California, that doesn't mean a lot. But what it does mean is C10 is licensed electricians. C46 is solar without being an electrician. So essentially they're saying you gotta have electricians to install solar in California. And these electricians, they said it have to be employed on a one-to-one basis. And they kept saying that in the article. I don't know what that means, whether like one person who is an electrician for every one that's not, or everyone has to be, they were unclear on that. But they included trainees, so essentially it's an IBEW kind of thing. You're probably, electrical or in a formal apprenticeship program, which is a big deal because 80% of the people installing solar in California do not have electrical licenses. So they're essentially in one swoosh putting 80% of the installers out of business.
Is that a proposal or is that passed?
It passed the contracting board. Now, I don't know if they have the final say or not. There were some people asking for clarification, whether that means they're appealing it or whether they just want to know what the heck are you doing. And it wasn't a close thing. It was 11-3 on this licensing group.
Well, they're all electricians. What do you think it's going to be?
I know, but you'd think they would have done it before, if it was that kind of, they didn't suddenly wake up one day and say, oh, this is going to hurt our business or whatever.
Well,
So,
didn't they wake up and hear they figured out that California is requiring solar panels for all houses?
yeah, that's been in place though for a little while. So, and one of my concerns is as California goes, so goes the nation in many regards as far as solar anyway.
Let's
So,
hope not.
Yeah, I think it's the first beginnings of seeing that we're moving to a very, from the wild, wild west of installation to a much more regulated world of installation. This seems to me to be an overreaction for whatever reason, but we're probably going to fall into, you've got to be certified, you've got to be licensed, you've got to be whatever. And maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's not. I guess it depends on how well they implement it. I know I had a friend who got his license in Illinois, and he just simply paid a fee. There was no testing, there was no oversight or whatever. Well, that doesn't really add value to the chain of installation. It just adds fees. So, and speaking of Illinois, they just passed a law essentially making it almost impossible for homeowners associations to prohibit you from installing solar on your home. Apparently, they had passed the law saying they couldn't prohibit it. So homeowners associations were requiring massive changes to the design. And now they're saying you can't do that either. You have to let them install what is considered a normal designed system. So that's interesting. So on one hand, we're getting some restrictions, in other areas, we're getting it loosening up. Bill, were you raising your hand yet?
Yes, Texas just passed a law signed into effect by the governor on September 1st, and I'll read it to you. Oh shit. Okay, a municipality may not prohibit or restrict the installation of energy device by residential or small commercial customer. That's terrific because I live in a little subdivision where a quote cannot be seen from the street. And the adjacent municipality has a similar ordinance in effect. Solar can not be seen in the street. So at both jurisdictions, and I'll be anxious to see whether they nullify the ordinance or what.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of those where
It'll be very interesting.
You're not allowed to be seen from the street, which doesn't make sense to me because.
No, absolutely not.
And I know there's a small town near us that restricts that your neighbors cannot see your solar installation. So that they've decided looks terrible. I know in some places in France, there were restrictions that they couldn't be seen from the church. So, because God hates solar. So,
In France, they make all their money with tourists. You know, you want to have the church look like a 15th century town. You know, you didn't have solar in the 15th century, let alone electricity.
Yeah, but you didn't have cars either, you know, so parking spaces, traffic lights, you know,
How are
there's,
they going to get the tourists in there?
yeah, I could see that you want to, it's like any kind of renovation, keep it in keeping with the historic nature of the property. And there's a lot of ways of doing that, you know, but just arbitrarily saying one kind of thing, you know, I think that's one of the problems with rules is there's just too much nuance, there should be an opportunity for common sense and nuance in these kind of requirements. So, you know, if they just state what is the objective instead of what is their proposed solution, that would be better, you know, because often the proposed solution is something somebody came up with and doesn't always work, you know. So I say, we want the place to look like it did in 1600 or whatever. Okay, we can live with that. How do we make that happen? Instead of, you must use only titanium screws, you know, to attach it. So, all right, speaking of solar shingles, these are building integrated PV. And the advent of Meyer Burger getting into solar shingles kind of got me into researching that, because I thought solar shingles were kind of dead and buried. DuPont, of course, was the first one to come up with these, and they folded up their program. Then Elon Musk in 2016 announced, apparently on the set of Desperate Housewives, that he was going to come up with these solar roofs. And I guess we should be suspect of any product announced on the set of Desperate Housewives. I think that's probably a good rule of thumb. But he then started taking advance orders. 2018, they began installing them. There's a lot of issues. There have been a lot of issues with it. You know, he's, as Don and I were talking about, he's a bit of a snake oil salesman. Everything's great, everything's wonderful, we're right on target. How come you haven't delivered anything? Oh yeah, everything's great, you know. So there was a real slow rollout. I guess they've installed some. That I couldn't determine. Some articles say he's installed thousands. Others have said he's installed hundreds. Others have said he's installed dozens. You know?
Of houses or shingles?
Yeah, I think housing installs.
Okay.
I saw the fifth. I saw the fifth installation in Houston the other day.
Oh, okay. And did it look good?
You know, it was what it was, and I got a tour by the homeowner. You know, 2 or 3 Tesla inverters. The normal sort of.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it looked good.
Do you know if you have to be Tesla certified to install?
I do not know.
I thought they required
It was
that for
done
all
by
their
Tesla, I can tell.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
My guess is yes. I mean, that's the way they've done their business with their power walls and things like that. But I didn't know for sure. The thing about solar shingles, to me, to my way of thinking, is the only solution, the only thing it's solving is aesthetics. I don't think it certainly has no technological advantage. In fact, there are a lot of disadvantages. They're typically less efficient and much, much more expensive. So once again, I would think there's other ways of dealing with the aesthetic issue if that's an issue for you. Another,
Today,
yeah.
If they got to a point where they would be like normal shingles, I mean, would that not? I mean, this is kind of, I'm sure some of this is kind of early business for the solar shingles. If they got the technology to the point where it was comparable to a normal panel, I mean, it would have more surface area. You might be able to put them on both sides of the house, even though it might not be economical for or aesthetically pleasing for the panels. Is that what they're looking for? Do you know, or is it just Is it strictly aesthetics?
I think it's strictly aesthetics because the problem with trying to deal with it like a regular asphalt shingle is you've got to have a three-dimensional element to do wire management. You know, these things have to have electrical connections. So it couldn't just be flat shingles that integrate in with other type flat shingles.
So they're not just like on the side or something? You're saying there is an amount underneath it, so it's just like a covering?
Yeah, well, I know the Tesla things are tiles, you know, like they're
Okay.
full tiles that
Mhm.
fit up. And they look to me to be about an inch thick when I see pictures of them. So there has to be wire management. There's also not going to be any air cooling of these solar shingles regardless of how you put them on. So there's going to be some inefficiencies there because they're going to operate in a hotter environment. You've got many more electrical connections. I mean, just you'd have to because they're smaller. So that creates additional problems for potential problems in the future. There's the wire management issue, which is an issue, the specialization of installation. Are solar installers roofers? You know, that's a different skill set because now you're dealing with the whole waterproofing, leaking, you know, aesthetics, gutters. You know, roofing is a profession, and to do it well, you gotta know what you're up to. With the Tesla system, they have a lot of dummy because they aren't with shingles. You just cut them to size and fit them in as you're working on them. You can't do that with these pre-manufactured panels. So you certainly can't do it if they're generating power. You can't cut into a solar cell. So that makes that more problematic. A good thing is the tax credit, the 26% tax credit applies then to your entire roof, you know, if you wanted to extend it. So if they could get the price point to be 26% or less more than a traditional system, you come out ahead. But the pricing that I saw,
the traditional system, you get the 26% too.
Yeah, but not for your roof.
Not for the roof. Yeah, the roof would have to, you're saying the roof would have to cover the differential, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
The 26% on the roof. Okay.
Yeah, because you know, with Tesla, you would get a new roof, but still get the tax applied to it. And some of the pricing, again, that was all over the place in different articles. One said that essentially the roofing cost is about 10 times what a traditional roof would be if you're just looking at the roofing, 3 times the cost of a traditional solar. So others were more generous. The estimated cost, the one that I found real numbers, they were talking about like a 1,700 square foot roof. They estimated the cost of the traditional asphalt roofing at about $9,350 for that size roof, which seemed reasonable, I guess, to me. I'd do it cheaper myself, but I'd be installing it myself and doing a crappy job. So, and the 10K array to put on there was $24,900, which is about right about $2.50 a watt. So total cost $34,250. So in this article, they said for the same Tesla, it would be $43,900. Well, looking at those numbers, that would be a relatively competitive product. But then I was looking at some articles, one from the New York Times, and they were talking to actual homeowners who had had it installed, asking them what they paid. And one of the things Tesla's been getting into is, for instance, there was a 4,000 square foot house where they had bid 75,000 to put it in, but then kicked it up to 112,000, you know, as they were installing it. So they sent a lot of nasty emails to people, I guess, saying, oh, we're almost doubling the price, you know, take it or leave it.
Do they have a justification? I mean, if you have a contract, you can't typically just double the price because you feel like it.
Yeah, well, I assume it's operating within their contract, but that, you know, they gave the people the option of backing out. But of course, a lot of people were saying they'd already spent money prepping for that install. And it was really kind of across the board where they increased 40, 50, 80% on their initial costs. They were talking like $21.35 per square foot for installation, which seems an awful lot. When I look at the 4,000 square foot roof at 112,000, let's see, that's about, in that range, what, $25 a square foot, 28, somewhere in there. Yeah, so I'm not a good judge of that because I have no money, so I wouldn't have spent any money on a Tesla roof anyway. But I guess if you've got a $800,000 home, you know, and you're willing to invest that kind of money in a roof, the paybacks on them were 23, 24 years, which is pretty comparable to the early adopter paybacks for solar. You know, so you could, I guess, in one vein, look at solar roofs as we're in an early adoption phase. Like this could be the next big thing, but you're paying a premium price. I still don't believe that. I don't think that we're in an early adoption phase. I think it's one of those ideas that sounds better than it turns out to be in practice, and that there are better options should you want to just simply deal with the aesthetics of solar. You know, I would think clear, you know, transparent solar panels would be a better option. I know they're not on the market, you know, in pure transparency, but it's a theoretical possibility. So that might be something that if we're really worried about the aesthetics, you know, just glass panels up there aesthetically disappear. You know, pergolas, whatever, there's a lot of different options if you want to hide things. So what are some of your ideas on that? Yeah, Jay?
Well, I think I'm the old person, at least of who I can see here. I remember my folks being upset that there was a house down the street that had an attached garage because you could see the garage door from the street.
Oh, yeah?
So maybe and now go up and down the street. I don't particularly perceive that garage doors exposed to the street are a big deal, or that they're decorator or anything else. They just look like garage doors. So maybe we're in that phase here where, you know, the panels become normative and then nobody will pay attention anymore.
Yep. Yeah, I remember even as a kid thinking how ugly TV antennas were on houses. And of course, the technology has shifted to where not every house has TV antennas sticking out of the roof. So well, you know, aesthetics is an issue, especially with someone's home, because, you know, the home is the castle and you're going to spend a lot of money trying to make it look attractive. So I think there's probably a niche market for it, but I don't think it's ever going to be more than that. You know, I think solar, you know, as you say, it's just another aspect to the house, you know, just like roof, you know, shingles. Shingles aren't that attractive, really. They can be, but most of them aren't.
Houses with gas lights didn't have wall switches.
Because they didn't like them, or because?
No, I mean, because the electrical switches on the wall would also have had to be at some point an aesthetic disruption of a nicely wallpapered wall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Okay. Any other? I was going to also mention there are 3 other major folks out there doing solar roofs: Luma Solar, Certainteed, and Suntegra. So all of them do solar roofs. The Luma Solar looks a lot like the Tesla roof with false panels and things. Certainteed looks more like the old DuPont shingles that sort of fit in and tuck around the regular shingles, although they do sit slightly proud. So they're pretty clearly something different. And the Centegra, they were talking 650 a watt. So clearly people think there's a market for this, but I don't see it. I wouldn't invest in it. So, yeah, Bill?
Yeah, a couple of questions. In the in-phase lineup of inverters, are there any that take input from more than one panel? That's one question I have. And I'll get an answer to that and then ask the second question.
Yeah,
Does
I
anybody
think,
know?
I think that the Series 8 that was scheduled to come out is designed to take input from 2 panels. That's something in my memory. I know that there are microinverters on the market, maybe not from Enphase, that can take 2 panels. Oh, 4 panels?
I'm using some that take 4 panels.
Yeah. But I thought that I read that the 8 was like an 800 watt unit with 2 panels hooked up to it.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, mine are 1200 watt.
Uh-huh.
From Hoy Miles. The question I have, so the Houston City Council did pass unanimously something in the building code that all new construction will be, quote, solar ready. And this kind of, and what I haven't read the resolution, but I assume that number one, you have one section of your roof that is south facing, and then running conduit from presumably the attic down to where the breaker box is. And then I think a couple of other things that might be integrated in future. Well, one in particular that new construction be battery ready, and that would be critical load panel. To me, that's what that implies. And wouldn't it be wonderful, in fact, if not only do you have a south-facing roof, but it is completely flat to ease or facilitate the installation of tiles, for example, to where you didn't have to miter the corners and deal with the valleys and all that stuff. I think that may be forthcoming in future building ordinance measures that will be enacted.
You think so? I mean,
Flat roof.
I would hate to see, you
once
mean
we
a
get-
flat plane without dormers and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah, to me, that would strike me as a bit of government overreach, telling me how I have to design the profile of my roof.
Yeah.
I could see having a conduit, going from the roof, or having some sort of conduit going from the meter, because of course the batteries are going to have to be outdoors. So they'll have to be out there with the next code. That's what I've read anyway. All batteries will need to be stored outside. You've got your disconnect that's out there. So you've got to have some sort of pathway to get from the meter to the service panel. So in many respects, that's more important, and having extra, but I think if you could have critical load panels already installed, that'd be huge too.
Sure.
So Jay, if all batteries are outside, what if you have, let's just say, old lead acid batteries, or I mean, that's for the Teslas. I can see that, the fancy new ones, but if you have any type of anything other than some of the more modern lithium ion type stuff, what are they going to do? You're gonna have to put them in a shed, or is a shed considered indoors?
No, it just has to be outside the dwelling unit.
Okay.
So my guess is, because a lot of these issues have not been addressed, because even lithium ion do not perform as well in cold temperatures as they would, but lead acid could seriously have some freezing issues and things of that nature. But I suspect we'll see a whole product line of heated enclosures. That's
What's the motivation? Is it safety? Is it? I don't.
Well, it's from the code, so it's clearly safety, but you would think that lead acid batteries are more prone to a safety issue storing outside because of the hydrogen than lithium ion. My guess, and it's only a guess, is because they're moving towards 1500 volt, 2000 volt battery banks
Mhm.
instead of the 48 volt. And I think they've determined that having that much voltage within the residential structure is inherently dangerous.
And I just am curious. I didn't realize who's having the battery banks with that high of a voltage.
Oh, that a lot of them. I mean, I know Tesla and those guys have already gotten it up to 600 volts to match the array. When they changed the last code, they said if the homeowner basically cannot get access to the terminals of it, voltage can be unlimited. Where before they limited it to 48 to 50 volts, basically. So there's motivation to keep pushing the voltage up because you can use smaller wire. You know, there's some, you know, cost savings. You know, we're seeing commercial systems up around 1500 volts for the arrays. So if you're getting electronic devices on a commercial system operating at 1500 volts, it would be good to have a battery bank that's operating at 1500 volts as well. So I think they're just anticipating this is the move, this is the way. But
Aside from the cost and the wiring and such, is there any performance benefit for having the higher voltage? I mean, if it's from the battery to the inverter, it's not gonna be that much of a drop from distance or anything.
no, it's not a voltage drop issue, but you do have some, whenever you're changing the voltage, like let's say the incoming voltage is 600 volts, then you have to drop it down to 48, then you have to kick it up to 240.
Okay, some
You know,
losses.
there's going to be some transition losses.
Okay.
So, yeah, Bill?
Oh, I was just going to say, in the electronic world, of course, transformers are used to change AC voltage. But in the DC world, there's two types of conversion voltage in DC, a buck converter and a boost converter. And, you know, I've been exposed to it, and it's deeply complicated, but reducing the voltage through a buck converter is easier than boosting the DC voltage through a boost converter.
Okay.
So, you know, it's trivia.
Yeah. I think we're going to be seeing all of our systems increasing in voltage. You know, I've been speculating for several iterations of the NEC that we're going to see the 600 volt limitation in residential eliminated or moved up to 1000 volts. There's no, to my way of thinking, an inherent safety. You know, 600 volts is not safer than 1000 volts, you know, necessarily. If you touch the wire, you're going to be dead anyway. So that part.
Has anybody been hit with high voltage DC? I have not. I can't remember.
Oh, I have with an electric fence, but the amps are very low. Yeah, that's like 2000 volts in my little electric fence, but just a tiny fraction of an amp. And in Europe, it's at 1000 volts right now and has been for many, many years for residential. So, you know, they're not dropping over dead just because, you know, theirs is at 1000 and ours is at 600. So, but there are definite cost savings if we could boost the voltage up. So, all right. Any other questions?
I might have missed this because I came in late, but there was something in the Wall Street Journal about a Sydney, Australia, like 13.5 ton Tesla battery thing that was supposed to be part of the grid that was on fire within its shipping crate.
Oh, really?
And I didn't read the details. I mean, there wasn't much detail, and I don't know, that was 3 or 4 days ago. But
did they think it was thermal runaway within the lithium ion? Is that what?
I don't think they knew. They just said that it was in its shipping crate. So I think they didn't know what did it.
Yeah. Well, I guess it could have been damaged somehow, and that happens with lithium ion. So.
But it's just going to highlight that lithium ions and these high voltage things are, you know, I think just what you're saying, which is these are all very site-specific and product-specific concerns, but between the cars that are, I guess the Bolt is having to do hardware changes instead of just software changes for the Chevy car problems too, right?
Mhm.
So it's, I mean, it's just a lot of power in a small amount of space is not apparently, I mean, you're all much better than I am handling high voltage stuff in small quantities, small spaces, and in proximity to people.
Yeah. Well, your shipping crate thing just reminded me, I was over at a guy's house who had received a box of solar panels, like a pallet-sized delivery, and hadn't really opened them up and looked at them, but had received them. And somebody had stuck a forklift prong through. So about half of the panels in there were just smashed to bits. So if you do receive product, look at it when you receive it, because as soon as that trucker leaves, that's the end of it. There wasn't going to be any kind of, he's like, well, they were fine when I dropped them off. You signed for them.
I've had people suggest to me, Jay, especially with getting solar stuff dropped off, to always sign hidden damage.
Oh, yeah. Just make note of the fact it hasn't been inspected.
Yeah, just make note of the fact that it's in a big box here. It's in a crate. We can't unbox the crate until while the guy's sitting there waiting, because he's going on to his next shipment.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think just to be cautious about it. So, all right. Well, I think that's it for today. So we'll see you all next Tuesday. All right. Enjoy your summer.
Good one. You too.
Bye.